Hello, Patriots. Big news. I've moved to Eastern Europe. I now live on a plot of land about the size of a new McDonald's. On this plot of land, I'm going to raise a family of young, half-British, half-Estonian patriots. And in 80 years' time, my descendant, Kai Stevens IV, is going to run straight into Britain carrying a poleaxe and an AR-15 in his hand. He's going to reconquista Britain. This is what we call the Nick Griffin method. Follow for more tips and advice. Of course, I'm joking, because I think the idea of running away to live in another land and assuming that your descendants are going to magically go and save and reconquista your country is ridiculous. So did quite a few notable people who now promote basically the exact same thing, but that's neither here nor there. That could be a topic for another video. So, sensible nationalism. We've killed it. We've put it in its grave. It's dead. Now it's time to get out the BUF armbands. We're going to go mask off. We're going to talk about, Austrian painter, all stuff like that. Wait, hold on. Maybe we should hold that thought. What is sensible nationalism? Well, let's go through the history of sensible nationalism first. The notable elements of it, that is. So, firstly, 1976, John Kingsley Reid splits from the National Front. He was at one point the chairman. He split from the National Front to form the National Party, which was supposed to be basically the National Front without the Nazi baggage of the National Front. The National Front had Nazi baggage largely because of John Tyndall being photographed in a brown shirt uniform, as you can see on the front. Very good book, by the way. National Front by Martin Walker, highly recommended by hardened National Front veterans as well. John Kingsley Reid, much more respectable face for nationalism than John Tyndall. A lot of people won't like me saying that, but it's just objectively true. Having horrendous, not even really deniable Nazi optics like John Tyndall had, all he could really say is, well, it was a mistake of my youth. Not quite the same as what John Kingsley Reid had, where he was the chairman of the Blackburn Conservatives something. I'll put his exact position here. I can't remember off the top of my head. Apologies. The National Party in Blackburn managed to win 2 seats at local elections. I'm not talking parish councils, I'm talking like actual proper council seats. That's all it took for them to gain that sort of popularity. The National Party, unfortunately, didn't see too much great success after they had won their seats in Blackburn. The entire state media apparatus came after them hardcore, and they had done some pretty snidey, pretty evil hit pieces on them, one of which you can still find on YouTube today. Maybe I should review it for a video or something. That might be interesting. Do a little reaction. But the point I'm making is they did very good, very fast compared to the National Front. They tried to use this as a platform to say, we are the more credible option. If you're in the NF, come join the MP and we'll do better. Let's move forward a bit in time. We're going to jump forward. 1999, Nick Griffin's leadership challenge for the BNP chairmanship. The reason why Nick Griffin won is because he came in with promises of modernisation. He wanted to bring the BNP into the 21st century, into Y2K. He wanted to bring it online. He wanted to clean up the image. And also another big stickler between Nick Griffin and John Tyndall is that Nick Griffin was a Cambridge graduate law student boxer, and John Tyndall was a Nazi. And he, over his God knows how many decades of leadership of nationalism, he had brought people together. He brought people into big numbers. However, he hadn't successfully achieved much in terms of elections. And Nick Griffin had a more fresh face for that. Also, the cleaner image, as it helped the National Party, surely it would help the BNP as well. The BNP did see very limited electoral success under John Tyndall. They had won a single seat, I believe, in Tower Hamlets. I don't believe they won anything after that until Burnley BNP, which was under Griffin's reign in the very early 2000s. You'll find out more about that in the book, How It Was Done, on Claymore Books, book by Steve Smith, who was the chairman of Burnley BNP. What Nick Griffin wanted to do with the BNP was he wanted to purge the 3 H's of nationalism: hard talk, hobbyism, and Hitler. Why did he want to purge Hitler from the BNP? You might be wondering. It's because going on about Hitler, going on about Oswald Mosley, has really done nothing but harm the image of nationalism for the longest time. This is the reality people need to face. Hitler, Mosley, it's antisocial. It's weird. You don't need to if you do believe in that stuff, here's the reality, right? You don't need to red pill the entire country on Hitler to save it. What you actually need to do is make sure that the white British become a sizable majority where they can't be democratically deposed. Hitler's got nothing to do with that. Mosley's got nothing to do with that. And for the people, the absolute geniuses that say things like, well, if they're going to call you a Nazi, you might as well be a Nazi. No, you're an idiot. Because there's a difference between being called a Nazi and being one and looking like an antisocial weird freak, and being called a Nazi and it being the lying press up to their usual tricks and you're the underdog victim of a smear campaign. Which one do people empathise with more? People don't like Nazis in Britain. It's the unfortunate reality. Yes, I'm sure the war in Israel and Gaza has changed some things. Maybe people are more willing to criticise Jewish and Zionist influence within the country. But you know what people are also still not liking? Hitler. It's just a fact. If you look at how they got John Kingsley Reid in the documentary that I'm going to put in the description below, the reason why they mugged him off so heavily is because two skinheads who he'd probably never even met because they'd literally just joined the National Party were it being recorded, being interviewed, looking like low IQ thugs with photos of Hitler in their living room or wherever it was. It's never gotten British nationalism forward to talk about Hitler. This is just the truth. It's just the truth. It's antisocial. It's weird. We'll get more into that another time. What it does do is that if you want to stream on Goyim TV and get super chats, go on about Hitler all you like. And in a more sincere way, if you're doing something educational, if you're doing something academic in relation to Oswald Mosley and Hitler, that's different. All right, that's not like being a fanatic. Oh, I'm like a 5'3" twink, and I'm going to start wearing BUF armbands. Come on, get a grip. You probably know who you are. I was directed at someone, and I tell that to their face as well quite easily. We need to step up the game a little bit here. We need to stop being weird. 2019, September, the first Patriotic Alternative Conference. Mark Collett gives his speech, and it's about that guy. Now, you see, that guy is the one who was always caught on camera by the journalists with his sort of dodgy 1930s tattoos, and he's drinking a pint of lager. That's a brief summary of what Mark Collett said in that speech. Basically, that guy is the skinhead. That guy is the person who looks antisocial, looks weird, turns people away from nationalism. All right? Let's not forget, when you didn't have the Nazi optics of John Tyndall leading the BNP, they had won over 50 elections in various different positions, 2 MEPs, one person in the Greater London Assembly, one county councillor in Burnley, and the rest were just various city or district council equivalents, right, all over the country, actually starting to do very well. And it seemed like it was going to keep going like that until Nick Griffin did loads of stupid leadership things, but it wasn't because of his optics that things went wrong, okay? Remember, things got better with the cleaner optics. I'm not saying by cleaner optics we need to ideologically... We'll get to that, right? Keep watching the video. Don't think I'm saying that we need to compromise on what we think or what policies. Let's move on. So, that guy's speech, it attracted two people of prominence to Patriotic Alternative. It attracted Kenny Smith and Steve Blake, who came as a pair at the time. Both of them had appreciated Mark's sentiments of getting rid of that guy and essentially cleaning up the image of nationalism, making it a positive force instead of an antisocial niche club, which we don't want it to be if we want to win. However, disagreements arise as to whether or not Mark Collett had followed through with the promise to purge that guy from nationalism. So that was one of the many reasons why there was the Homeland and PA split. I'm really cutting down the history here because there's a lot to go through. So there's the PA Homeland split. The people who go with Homeland, Kenny Smith says to them, we're going to go for a mantra of sensible nationalism. Sensible nationalism at the time was sold to us as not compromising on the ideology, not compromising on the platform of nationalism. However, what we are going to do is we're going to purge cranks and weirdos. Purging cranks and weirdos meant getting rid of that guy, essentially. No Nazi optics, no weirdos who want to go on about Oswald Mosley and acts like freaks. Just essentially making nationalism look respectable, making it pro-social, not anti-social, making it an attractive movement that is going to attract serious people. The issue with going on about Hitler and Mosley, right, is that the type of people it attracts are anti-social, weird people. If you look at the most radical groups in, far-right British history, let's look at those who went the hardest. Right, I'm going to go for a bombastic one here. Atomwaffen, Sonnenkrieg Division. Do you know what those groups were full of? The ones who were like the hardest on the Nazi stuff. Full of paedophiles. Literally full of paedophiles. Every one of these like niche, terror extremist groups, literally full of paedophiles. That's just true. That's just true, right? Everyone, So, yeah, I know that's an extreme example. So to say everyone who's ever been attracted to those ideas is one of those things. I'm obviously not saying that. What I am saying is, though, is that trying to make nationalism a weird, antisocial outsiders club is going to attract other types of outsiders who are only attracted to it because, I'm already an isolated niche weirdo. This ideology is also full of isolated niche weirdos. I'm going to join them. So, what happened to sensible nationalism? Because initially, people really loved the idea of sensible nationalism. Same ideas, wrapped up, packaged nicely, without stupid optics, encouraged to do good in your community and become a bastion of what a nationalist should be, right? All that's very good stuff. However, what happened to sensible nationalism, or why is it such a despised term now? Well, this brings us nearly to today. The general perception of sensible nationalism is that it was ideological cucking, which it never should have been. The ideological cucking comes from the Homeland Party putting in a policy about protecting gay spaces in the health and social policy. It was something to the effect of gay and lesbian spaces will be protected under the fact that they are same-sex spaces. So basically, it was policy to appeal to gays, lesbians, and trans-exclusionary radical feminists. This policy was almost universally, if not universally, hated by the officers in the Homeland Party, the structure of the party being National Council, the officers, and then the activists. There was also the issue of Carter, McAfee, and the Northern Irish branch organiser, Femboy Gate. And I am someone who speaks with honesty. I only say what I believe to be as true. So I'm not going to sit here taking, low shots at the guy. And, he did regret his past. He shouldn't have been made a branch organiser. And I think a lot of the stuff, all the claims about him, were heavily exaggerated by a psychotic freak, troon ex-boyfriend of his, unfortunately. This is a reality of the modern world, okay? Gen Z have grown up in an incredibly degenerate culture and lifestyle, and more things like that will happen again. I think I had a conversation with Alec Yerbury of the National Rebirth Party, where I said to him, the only reason why he hasn't had a Carter McAfee yet is because he doesn't have enough members to. But it's an inevitable scenario. It's happened numerous times. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but before the Carter McAfee stuff, there was a new party that pops up called the National Democrats, the TND party. The National Democrats, not to be confused with the one that was a successor of the National Front, was ran by this guy. We found his X account, and he just was following hardcore twink corn accounts, basically. So he got humiliated off the scene. Then more recently, Hugh Anthony's past has come to light. I'm not going to attack Hugh Anthony either. My point is, all right, a bit of leeway for these people. Something like 10% of Gen Z exists as being gay. We can't really exclude these people from the movement. If they're not got the most worst baggage in the world. Carter, unfortunately, basically hit the jackpot on how much could you be mugged off for. Small things could be let slide, I think. So there's been a lot of talk, a lot of history. I'm going to get to my actual point now. My point is, right, we've got sensible nationalism 1.0, radical nationalism, clean optics, clean image, the same ideas but put in a clean, presentable light. 2.0, ideological concessions and being gay, right? What we're going to do is, what I want to do is I want to turn back the clock and we're going to go to sensible nationalism 1.0, radical nationalism, clean optics, clean image. To paraphrase Jonathan Bowden, you're never going to be whiter than white, but you can be clean. Many people reference Jonathan Bowden. They post Bowden memes, but how many of them actually listen to Jonathan Bowden and what he says? Where we are now is we've got this false dichotomy being presented on the right, window pushing. Sounds like it could be a metaphor for something homosexual. And political route. Yes, I know my handwriting is not very good. It's a lot better with a whiteboard, trust me. So people, so the juvenile perception of both from each side is that people who are on the political route, they believe in a false dichotomy. They'll say that those who are pushing the Overton window, the cranks, the bad actors, the juvenile, the bad optics, they're actually setting nationalism back. What the people on the window pushing side will say about those on the political route is they're going to say these people, oh, they're ideologically cucking, they're not radical enough, X, Y, Z. We've all heard it all before, most likely. But these are not mutually exclusive ideas. Now, the ideas that have been presented by people on the Overton window side of things is that what we need to do is we need to go as radical as possible and be as unforgiving about it as possible. So that way, the Overton window is going to expand, and the people who are secretly sympathetic to us in mainstream positions, whether they be news presenters, whether they be in the House of Lords or MPs, are now going to be able to push things closer to our talking points. We'll be able to get more of what we want. I take issue with this, not because I don't believe that there are people, I know there are people in mainstream powerful positions who will support people like Steve Laws in private and talk to him in private, get his advice on ideological stances in private. That is a good thing. That is progress. But I do not trust the Conservatives or the Reform Party to reverse demographic change. This country needs something far more than deportations of millions. This country needs entire economic restructuring because it is bankrupt and it is essentially propped up by City of London financial black magic, which is a bad thing. We are producing nothing. We are filling this country with immigrants to essentially be the tax cattle slave class of the country, to prop up pensions. We're addicted to immigration like it's heroin, and if we get rid of the immigrants, it is actually not going to magically solve everything, and it will be economically very destructive. Unfortunate reality, red pill for some people, which you're not going to like. But what I propose is these two things work together in tandem. Like with all good models, they have assumptions typically. All good economic models do. So for this, I need you to work with me here. Let's go on the assumption that we're going to have a good, productive nationalist party, because I think inevitably one will rise. I will do another video dedicated to why I believe in nationalist political parties, but for the sake of keeping this video a little bit shorter, I'm not going to explain my reasoning here. But to give some brief outlines, one, I believe nationalist parties are important to give nationalism good face and structure. Two, you can't win if you don't play. Charles Carroll. Three, it's the only actual tangible route to victory. So this model here, I believe, accurately reflects the current state of politics in Britain. Here's our Overton window, right? So starting from, this is the middle of the Overton window, right? So got Reform, they're bang in the middle. There's still a range for them to go to the right of what's acceptable, but they're scared of doing it. In the radical position, we've got a nationalist party, and on the extreme position and beyond, we've got Steve Laws. So this is the range of what's acceptable, this is the range of what's radical, and this is the range of what's extreme, right? Radical to extreme beyond. So why do I say nationalist parties are just radical, but they're not in the extreme? I think that if you explain nationalism to most people who are in any way sympathetic to us, you can actually get them to agree with basically 95% of what you could push to them, essentially, if not more. You know, bear in mind, right, I've done canvassing, I talk to people on a daily basis whenever I get a chance to, I talk to my family, I talk to my friends, I talk to absolutely anyone I can, because I actually want to try and gauge opinions of people. I want to try and see where the public are at. And bear in mind, I live in Norwich, which is quite a liberal city, to say the least. You can convince people very easily that having a 95% white British country would be an exceptionally good thing, and that's the way the country should be. The only issue is that people say, oh, but you'll never get it. Right? They're too pessimistic to actually go for it. So this is why I'd say a nationalist position is a radical position. As well, I put it in radical because nationalist positions and policy are being adopted by absolutely everyone right now, despite it being radical. So that's why it's just about in a radical position. It's no longer on the extreme anymore to be a nationalist. And so because I believe that nationalist positions, nationalist policy are being ever more widely accepted by the day, hence the shifting of the Overton window. A nationalist party doesn't need to make ideological concessions. It just needs to take a build it and they will come approach, and people will naturally come to it. People are naturally switching on to legal immigration. Everyone is against illegal immigration. Even foreigners are against it in large part. Not always, but a surprising amount of them are. I remember being in a gym, and this random Romanian guy comes up to me, starts complaining about all the Pakistanis in Norwich. I was like, yeah, fair enough, mate. Well, you're not wrong. Might be a bit part of the problem, but so what are the ways this window has shifted? Firstly, reform. They have somewhat pushed what is acceptable to the right, and they're continuing to do so. But why are they pushing what's acceptable to the right? Because they've got competition and they've got fear. The same way UKIP pushed the Overton window in terms of leaving the EU, and the Conservative Party had to essentially cut to them and obviously give us the referendum. Because they were being outflanked by other people, they had to move in line. And because we've got Steve Laws, who is, sitting right on the edge, pushing the limits as much as he can, that's also shifting the extreme to the right. It's making the other positions, such as the nationalist position, less radical. Where are we going to be in 2030? Bear in mind, of course, this is a hypothetical model, hypothetical situation. This could come quicker, it could take longer. But I think roughly in 5 years, this is where we're going to be. All right, so SL1, Steve Laws wanted to move to SL2. There's not much more Steve can go to the right, but maybe he'll find a way. What else has happened in 5 years? There's been another Manchester Arena bombing. There's been 2 more summers of rioting and, a summer or 2 of peaceful protesting. The migrant hotel situation has not gone away. There are more of them now in HMOs, and people don't know where they are, but they're still lingering around outside schools. Maybe there's been another Charlie Kirk type situation. There's been another Irina Zarutska, but in the UK. Things have just gotten worse. And as such, those who are saying the online rights sects, broadly from the centre to the right, are all moving to the right. They're getting angry, they're getting more radical. Reform's panicking because Rupert Lowe keeps moving to the right and keeps outflanking them. Ben Habib, with his Elon Musk billionaire funding, is also starting to gain a bit more traction. So Reform is having to move more to the right. And as such, where is acceptable has shifted to the right. The Nationalist Party is still in the range of radical, and the extreme and beyond is still the extreme and beyond, right? But, notably, the nationalist position, the Nationalist Party, is closer to being acceptable because they're still giving the answers which Reform are too scared to give, and that is being against demographic replacement. For a party to exist, they do have to take a sensible, professional, clean platform. You can never be whiter than white, but you can be clean. Our positions are becoming more acceptable day in, day out, year by year. We all say that things have taken a radical shift to the right in the past 2 years. That's true. It's probably going to keep going like that. And as well, we look at where, say, for example, the BNP did very well. These areas were usually about 60 to 75% white British, places that had actually been really badly harmed by multiculturalism, where the people had seen the problems of multiculturalism. However, there were still enough white British people to vote in favour of a nationalist position. Now, Tower Hamlets was like that. But we didn't have the internet back then. So only the people in Tower Hamlets knew how bad it was. Same places like Burnley, Dagenham, Blackburn. However, the whole country is nearly like that. And the internet exists. X exists as a free speech platform where you can have these videos of what it's like in Cradley Heath, for example, where it looks like an absolute S-hole, or Smethwick, Birmingham, or London, or Leicester. People look at there and think, oh, yeah, I don't want my area to look like that. Once again, this is the reason why the nationalist position, the nationalist party, will be more popular, because it will be the nationalist party who's the only one who's going to say, with any credibility or radicalism, yes, we need to solve this issue. You're going to have slopulist parties, like the current form of UKIP, Advance UK, Britain First, who will just say, we need to kick all the immigrants out, but we're not going to have any real consistent ideological platform. What does Nick Tenconi actually think? He says, oh yeah, we need to kick out millions, but I'm not an ethno-nationalist and I love based and bougie, and ethno-nationalists believe every single non-white person needs to be kicked out. Just total nonsense, just total nonsense and idiocy. A nationalist party will be one full of people who aren't low-educated boomers, who don't know what they're talking about and are just repeating things they've heard on X. and going on about why you shouldn't pay your council tax. Now you can legally get away with not doing it if you cite the Magna Carta 3 times in the mirror on Halloween and do a turn, right? The Nationalist Party will be the ones promoting real economic change, real societal change, real social change. It will be a breath of fresh air. That's why it's still a little bit more radical than slopulism. So where are we in 2039? Steve Laws was assassinated at a Stop the Boats protest. However, his body was recovered, and using new Neuralink technology, we've managed to rebuild him like the Terminator. And this is where we have Mecha Steve Laws. Mecha Steve Laws, he has not got any filter. He is off the charts. He is off the reservation. He's off the Overton window. He's this far to the right. But still, because of how far things have shifted to the right with the Overton window, he is still being contacted by these mainstream figures, some of which have led to some rumours. That being that Kemi Badenoch even told Steve that she was going to deport herself. And Steve Laws said, right on. Mecha Steve Laws said, right on. And normal Steve Laws would say that now. The Nationalist Party has been building, it's been growing, it's now got 80,000 members, if not more. It's taken a seat or 2 in Parliament, maybe even more. You could look at a place like Great Yarmouth, for example. Is Rupert Lowe going to be running for a seat again in 14 years' time? Probably not. He might not do it in 2034, he might not do it in 2029. Maybe the Rupert Lowe craze has died down a bit. Maybe he's had some scandals or he's not followed through with a lot of what he said. Point is that there are going to be seats that are going to be open season for nationalists in 2034. Great Yarmouth would be a good example of one. The Nationalist Party has got multiple council seats because Reform are not liked in Great Yarmouth, but they are because they're the ones who put in the legwork with community politics. So the Nationalist Party in 2034, they got a few seats and now they're ready to take the reins in 2039. Maybe the demographics have shifted slowly enough that they could have another go in 2044. They've got plenty of county council seats, city council seats, parish councils entirely dominated by them for the most part. Nationalists are winning and they're doing great. They're absolutely thriving. The mainstream media is going crazy at this new Nationalist Party because mainstream media, the issue is, right, while they are propagandizing and they're lying, they also have to make money. So we also have to sell hyperbolic stories about the mainstream Nationalist Party, free propaganda all the time. Someone's gone on Question Time and they didn't mess it up, and it's happened multiple times. There's a new Jonathan Bowden who's returned and he's the one who's on Question Time. Who knows what could happen, right? There's been economic collapse and strife. Reform caught the hot potato of the economic collapse, which is being passed around the mainstream parties. People are crying out for something new. They're crying for the Nationalist Party, and that is why they're now comfortably in the acceptable position. The Nationalist Party has moved a little bit to the right. They took a bullet and they will come approach, but now things are getting so bad that even they're like, all right, maybe we need to do a little bit more deportation of legals and undesirables. They have to sharpen their swords ever more because people now know that demographics are destiny. They don't want the country to look like what America looks like in 2034, where the demographics of the country have made it permanently a Democrat, communist state. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. We'll be permanently Democrat probably after 2028, though. That's realistic. Reform's position for trying to appeal to Muslims and Sikhs, they're now considered part of the radical left. They're not in the acceptable area anymore. Tory Robinson, all forgotten about because now everyone hates Israel and he's a Zionist shill. And Israel's ran out of money to... No, they're not going to run out of money to stop propaganda those people. Let's be realistic here. That was all realistic until I said Israel runs out of money to stop paying Sivnat slopulists to steal right-wing positions. To summarise, sensible nationalism is important. Nationalism should have a clean face. It should be presentable. It should be respectable. And we should still go down the political route. I'll get more into that in another video. But briefly, if I could sum it up in one sentence, you can't win if you don't play. If you think that white people should go live in zoos like Arania, but in Britain, and then magically one day we're going to do some great march through the institutions like the left did, you're delusional. It's not going to happen. It's not tangible. If you think there's going to be some civil war, I would say there's definitely not going to be a civil war. Look at South Africa. Where's their civil war? And that's it. Nationalism still has a chance. It's got a bright future. You can't win if you don't play. We'll explore more of that in the next video. Stop saying sensible nationalism's dead. It is important. Don't be antisocial. Be cool. And peace, gangster. And peace, gamers. Like, comment, and subscribe.